which maps to an address, an IP address, that uniquely identifies a computer on the internet. So what's a top-level domain? These are usually the two, the .ke, .fr for France, the two or more letters at the end of a domain name that give a domain name meaning or association. Like .ke automatically means Kenya. If you look at our .com, most of the time it means commercial. It's always meant commercial entities. .edu means educational entities, and .gov means government entities. So that's the two also generic. And then generic top-level domaining, sometimes we have a country designation as well, but those are actually quite rare, and it's only in countries where it's actually synonymous, like .tv. .tv is actually for a country called Tijuana or something like that, and it's not being used as a generic top-level domain for the TV, for the TV industry. So, and then is the country code top-level domain, and the country code top-level domains are what I was saying. They're specific to country or territories, or a sovereign state or dependent territory. So, for Kenya, .ke, .uk, .jp for Japan. So, the Internet Corporation for Assignments and Numbers is the body mandated to coordinate internet resources, mainly domain names and internet number resources, so IP addresses and domain names. In terms of now the new gTLD program, which is where I'm heading to, it's an initiative that's meant to introduce new gTLDs, including both the so-called ASCII meaning the alphanumeric ones, and then IDNs. If we just scroll a little bit up, somebody can help me scroll up. Yeah, the IDNs, as you can see, internationalized domain names, in languages that are not Latin, in Latin script, in terms of just internationalizing the domain name sector. So, those are the two areas. At the beginning, there were only 8 gTLDs that predate the formal establishment of ICANN, and those were .com, .edu, .gov for government, .int for international, .mil for military, .net, .org, and .archive. But after the formation of ICANN in 1998, there were 2 other application rounds. The first one in 2000, which came about and brought about 50 new applications, were submitted, and only 7 were approved. .iro, .biz, as in BIZ, .coop, as in COOP, .info, .museum, .name, and .pro. Then in 2004 to 2003, or around 2004, there were 10 additional applications that were submitted, and only 6 were approved, and those were .asia, .cat, .jobs, .mobi, .teletel, as in telephone, and .travel. Applications received around those years, 2000 to 2004, were actually based mainly on published criteria, and those applicants that were successful went ahead to then sign TLD register agreement with ICANN. So now currently, the incentive that was provided by ICANN to introduce this new set of gTLDs was the perceived perception to promote competition in the provision of registry services, the need for consumer choice, and the need for market differentiation, and also the need for geographic and service provider diversity. But I think as you look at most of the applications and really give us a presentation from a business perspective, you notice that most of them are brand names, and so the issue of diversity is a big question here that governments are actually questioning in terms of really this new round of gTLD applications really provided by diversity that was perceived to have been provided. And for this specific round went through quite a lengthy consultation with all the so-called constituencies or the committees that form the Internet Corporation for Assignments and Numbers. And one of them is the generic name supporting organization. That's the organization that actually deals directly with policies that deal with the domain names themselves. And then the CCNSO, the Country Code Name Supporting Organization, the Government Advisory Committee, which is brings all government together, and that's the body I sit on. I represent Kenya, and I'm also the vice chair of that. And a civil society committee, which is called the at-large committee. So today, there are about 1930 new applications. A staggering 844 of those applications are from the United States of America. Only 17 are from Africa. So, I mean, you can see in terms of geographical diversity, that really, it really didn't bring that much of diversity again. And then on top of that, most of them are more or less like defensive applications. Like several of them are from Google, and others are from Amazon, and the few that are from the African continent are actually from African businesses trying to protect their names, like multi-choice, trying to protect their specific names. So not really necessarily names, like for example, ICANN didn't apply for the Nairobi. The Maasai community did not apply for that. And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Is it because we lack awareness, or is it because we don't have the money, or is it because we haven't really got into the digital economy as Dr. Leno was talking about this morning? Now, another excuse that's been given is that the international domain names here, which enable internet addresses again to appear, of course you can see Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Japanese, would represent a huge opportunity. But then when you look at them as well, it's just 16 applications. I think about 16 of them, which is 6% of the total of the whole 1930. And some of them are actually from 37 American companies. Some of them are from American companies which want to expand into the market, the Chinese market and the Asian market. So that's quite a big big challenge for ICANN as well, and for us as well in terms of how we participate in the so-called digital economy. And then in addition, when we look at most of these 1930 applications, most of them suggest they're back-end servers. Back-end servers means the companies or organizations that are going to be providing the technical services to ensure that this domain name operates. I don't want to use any brand words or acronyms, are also based, again, in the US and in Europe. I think for Africa, we've only got and I think we're looking, or are looking correct me if I'm wrong, about 5 registries, about 5 of them, and most of them are based in South Africa, and one in Ghana, one in Senegal, one in Kenya. So about only 5. So I think we do need to really begin to question how and why we are not involved. And also, but what is most important, and why I'm standing here today, is because we have a public, there's a public objective to actually make sure that we look at most of these things, ensure that we develop a Kenyan position. Just like we're talking about ITRs this morning, we do need to develop a Kenyan position regarding some of these applications. Some of them, for example, like .health, are from companies that provide health services, not from the World Health Organization. What is our position on that? There's several applications for .bank. What do we think about that? And even those applications for .bank are from US companies. What do we think about that? There are others that have to do with religion. And I think what I would like to suggest to you is you're going to work with several of you to actually look at our laws and see to what extent some of them are either controversial or go against our own law, so that we can develop a Kenyan position so that I'm able and the CCK that sits on the dashboard together with me are able to provide what we're calling early warning and objections. Another good example, for example, is we have 2 applications for .Africa, and I can see my colleague from DSA here. One of them is .Africa as in DOT Africa, and it's also, I think it's a geographic application. There's another one from the African Union Commission, then Africa. According to the ICANN application guide, for a geographic application to be submitted, you have to have support from the community. In this case, support from the community entails, if it's a geographic name, it entails having support from the government, from the internet community, and from other stakeholders. In our case, for a .Africa application, it meant literally getting the more than 60% of African governments supporting an application. So that's another one that we're going to have to look at, because if you can't have two Africa applications because of the similarities as well. So one of them, I'm sorry, my colleague, one of them will have to be the one that actually sustains that name. And so this gathering here is very important because it's going to be giving us the mandate, when we call it that way, to actually be able to go back and provide a Kenyan position on all of this. I'll give you another example. There's an American company that has applied for, actually it's Delta. Delta has applied for Delta. Nigeria there's a state called Delta, and so the Nigerian government has already put in an early warning saying that, they're against that application. So it's going to be interesting how the ICANN board is going to deal with that, because on one end you have a government who's saying no, and on one end you have a business entity that has legitimate ownership to that name. So it's going to be a very interesting process, especially for the Government Advisory Committee in terms of how it provides advice. So the way we would want to go about it is, I think the way Cryptonet, ISOC, and all the other mailing lists have done is, again, provide this list, get a couple of us to actually look through it, look at our laws, see what provisions we have, see what names are controversial, and which ones we should actually be putting in an early warning, and then take back, because the early warning process is going to start sometime in August, September, just before the next meeting that's going to be taking place in Toronto. So that's an important process that I think we'll be coming back by next week for your input. But for now, before I continue, because this is
Scroll down to apps.com, if you don't mind. Apps.com. You can see the giants who are fighting for this. I mean, I'm really waiting for this competition to see. Apps.com. There is Alibaba. There. If you look at which are the companies that, where are the company names here? Apps.com. App registry. Scroll down. Where the company? Yeah. Amazon.com. Top level, domain holdings, merchant law. I think there's Google somewhere also. This company, Charleston Road, I think is Google. So companies are not only fighting for their names. So it's beyond just defensive in terms of just Apple, of course, has gone for .apple. Google has gone for .google. Microsoft has done .microsoft. But it's beyond that. It's the fight for specific spaces. So you're talking about apps, you are talking about, there are certain gTLDs which transcend different industries, like what my colleague Alice has talked about. So what would be the decision? Would we give .health to WHO, or would we give it to a health management organization? Is it only about commercial, or is it beyond commercial? The arguments, pros and cons, for each side. So, coming back to us, to Africa, it's telling. I mean, there's obviously the issue of the cost. It's cost what, 195,000 just for the fees. You haven't talked about the preparations, the lobbying. So my guess would be that would be north of $1 million. Alice, $1 million. There. So what does it cost in terms of beyond the monetary value of it? What does it cost to have a .Kenya? I mean, we've already lost Kenya.com. It's being used by a travel agency. Yeah, and there are cases, there are lots of case studies about companies fighting to get their names back. I think the most popular one, Barcelona.com, they fought, was a travel agent. The Barcelona Municipal Council fought and got it back after a long battle in court. Walmart.ca, cyber squatter decided he's going to register Walmart.ca, and he had it for some time, and they had to go to court and finally won it. So these are the things, is it only commercial? Is it beyond commercial? Is it a mix of both? And we must, as Africans, we must enter that conversation. We cannot continue to be bystanders. There are ways and means to do this because it's beyond the money. Alice will tell us that there are ways that ICANN would do this without necessarily charging you a fee. In fact, I think there is even a process that assists certain specific applications. They are taken through that whole process, the legal process, the commercial process. So I think that's my 2 cents.
I just wanted to add about the way of support for needy Africans. And in fact, Kenya was the one that was leading this process, where we successfully managed to lobby for ICANN to develop a fee and a process to support needy applicants coming from, of course, developing countries and Africa being one of them. Now, unfortunately, when you look at the applications, only 3 of them applied for that support. And the 3 are actually people coming from ICANN, or former ICANN community people. So nobody from any of the so-called needy countries or needy areas applied. And what is the problem with this? When Kenya made its submission or asked these questions to the ICANN board, our concern was that we don't think there has been enough awareness created or outreach created, especially in the Africa region. And one of the things we promised to do with Ask Kenya is to actually help through the Kenya IGF and the East African IGF that's going to be taking place in 2 weeks' time, to see whether we can contribute to begin by contributing to ICANN's strategy planning process. I was just looking at the respondent rate. ICANN had put out a survey about a couple of months ago, and the respondent rate was very low from Africa. Only 10 people responded to a survey that was asking, how would you want ICANN to serve you better at an international level, or just simply improving ICANN's global reach. From North America, 25, Latin America, 25, Europe had the largest with 70 respondents and 20 from Asia, only 10. So one of the things I'm trying to see is, even you here, if we are able, between Internet and ISO Kenya, we can send that survey out again, and you can fill it up. I think we still have time to contribute to shaping the strategy of ICANN, and perhaps begin to create our own, as Dr. Nemo said this morning, our own outreach and understanding of ICANN processes, so that we can begin to get involved actively. So that I would really like to see, I think I made a joke last year during the Kenya IGF, I would have loved to see our youth perhaps applying for .youth, Kenyan youth, and .youth, and being applied for, by Kenyan youth, or even .Nairobi or .Masai, a community application, and seeking that support. So I think it's very important that we contribute to the current strategic plan that is being discussed and being under process. And what we are going to do is send the survey out again and urge you to kindly respond to it. And I think this is the time you can ask questions to understand ICANN
understand ICANN processes more. And Ali and I are here, and I think there are other people who really understand ICANN and why it's important to us. So I think I look forward to hearing from you. And I saw questions already here.
Yeah. You're the first person to get a mic on this one. Well, yeah, maybe for those who understand, I just, on the Twitter handle for today's event, I put out the article that's from .Connect Africa that says that .Connect Africa has applied for the same string as Uniforum. That is just a clarification, so I believe there is no question about that. But at the end of the day, Africa has to be the winner in the end. At the end of the day, we have to have a domain for Africa. So that's what I could say about the .Africa gTLD, both DCA. I know there was a ... and it was quite a hilarious time to see many articles written about the same, but they are the same string, .Africa and .Africa. Just the writing, but it's the same thing. Just to finish, yes, indeed, many Africans. If you ask even in the streets, I ask many people, do you know about ICANN? And they tell you what? I tell them, even the ICT guys don't even know about ICANN, and yet they talk about the .coms and the .orgs every day. So it's our prerogative to educate others. I believe Alice and Hussein and the rest of the people, I hope many people can get into the mailing list. Actually, gTLD is very, it's a good mailing list for us to get all this information. And maybe perhaps, I didn't see a lot of university people around. It's good to have students. If they can get in as young as they are, it's better for, so that so that ICANN can be known. You know, someone put up an article in Cycle ID about, has Africa been left behind by ICANN, or has Africa left ICANN? So right now, as Africa is getting more and more aware about the gTLDs and its involvement in ICANN is getting stronger, so it's up to us to be able to work hard, probably reduce the wrangles that we have around and all the noise, so that our voice is better and it's clearer, so that we stop raising a lot of controversies and rather may put our voice forward. I mean, we are a formidable force if you look at how the markets are looking at us right now. So those who have come here, I believe today are going to be ambassadors, and if you have not joined gTLD or all these other mailing lists, it's better if you be involve your people in your organization, let them know about ICANN. It's quite a very important organization. Thank you.
Yeah, Barak Otieno here. I'm also an interested party in a way. And yes, I wish to agree with what my colleague is saying there. It's important that we all understand what's happening. Yes, we have two, I don't want to call them competitors. Applicants, exactly. We have two applicants for the .Africa stream, but I think just as Alice mentioned, it's a geographical string, and it's important that plenty of resources will definitely be raised from this string. You know, people are fighting not because of the string or because it's a nice string, but because of what can come out of the string. But the question is, what will these resources be used for at the end of the day? You know, should it be run by a business entity or should it be run by the community? I leave it to you to decide. But I think whatever proceeds will be received from this stream have to benefit the entire African continent. So I think the applicants should demonstrate that whatever proceeds they're going to get from these streams are going to benefit the African community in a way. I don't want to say much. As I said, I'm also interested, and I leave it to us to think about it. Thanks.
My question is, what will happen after these applications? Is there another round that will be open? And to Alice, having been part of this process and having seen how ICANN works, I'm just wondering, is there an alternative, or is this the way it has to be, or because sometimes I wonder whether there's something else we can do, you know, especially seeing as not so many Africans were able to get or even to apply in the first place for these gTLDs.
My question is a simple one. Alice, are there domains that are prohibited based on our context locally? Or is it an issue of, say, Kenyans or the Africans have a lot of self-censorship? They don't want to go out there and be seen to propose crazy names, yet they're the same people who go to those sites and read the same content?
Alice, ICANN to me is rocket science. And as you say, even those ones who are involved in ICT, they don't know about it. And as sons and daughters of Africa, you know that we've got a long way in transforming our nation to a modern world. So do you have initiatives to take that, educate people about that ICANN and making them know? Do you have those initiatives actually?
Hi everyone, Elizabeth Rembo here. The release of the applicants really came as a shock to me because I actually expected to see .safaricom, .kq, because those are the companies which actually have money. So is it really about cost or just ignorance? That's just a question.
Alice, you can take your responses, then I think we have some remote questions which you can take after.
Yeah, I'll start with the first question that was asking whether there's going to be another round and when. We don't know whether there's going to be another round, but we're hoping there is going to be another round. I think because we hope we are going to make a good case to prove that the current round was not as diverse, and it's probably not going to be providing the level of competition we needed to see. And I think what we may go back and say to ICANN is they need to do a little bit more work to ensure that we get the level of diversity and competition that we want to see. Having more than 844 domain names applicants coming from one region is not enough for us, as you say, to understand what ICANN is about, and it will continue being rocket science for as long as it's not in a part of the world. And having said that, I think I'll link this response to the question you asked about ICANN. And I think that is one of the biggest issue, and that's why we're talking about ITRs. That's why the IGF was even set up. It was actually set up out of this controversy. The controversy, back to the question that Grace Bomu asked, in that, is ICANN the only way? Why should it be ICANN, an organization that is based in the US, that decides, which new domain names are coming up and which, when the second or fourth or fifth rounds should be coming, and how much it should cost? And I think, those are very important questions which I have no answer to, because we are also struggling to ask ourselves that question. Those of us who really support ICANN as a perfect multi-stakeholder model, which we think is working. It has its own failings and weaknesses,
But I truly believe that it's working if we give it a chance and continue to contribute towards this very important model that we think does make a difference in just the way we've been going about governance generally. And so it's back to us again. I think we need to understand it, to create more opportunities for outreach and that awareness. In terms of, is there an alternative? I think I don't even want to imagine the other alternative, because I don't see any at the moment, to be honest. One who is mentioning is whispering ITU as an alternative, but I think that's not the issue. It's how ICANN goes about its business, and whether or not we feel that we are part of it, and whether or not it's actually abiding to its own rules of accountability, transparency, whether we can see a certain level of diversity and competition in the domain industry. I think that is what is important. And then prohibited names, domain names locally. I think before our new constitution, I think I would have immediately said .gay would have been prohibited, because I think homosexuality was illegal. But I think the new constitution, provides provision and protects. So I don't think there's any name that is prohibited for Kenya. What I think would be important is to look at it from a public interest perspective. I'll give you the example that I think Ali brought up. .health. Mungiki might be prohibited. One of the examples is .health. Yeah. How do we, as Kenyans, would we like to see .health being held by the World Health Organization? Because we know that is where we're going to be getting legitimate information regarding health? Or would we rather have it managed by Alice Munyua, who's a quack doctor, or who manages health services? Or let's assume, let me give you an example, or AAR. So I think it's that comparison between the public interest, and I think we also have to define to ourselves what is public interest. There was an interesting case when we were in Prague where there's an application for .kids, and you have applicants, NGOs actually lobbying governments to ensure that .kids actually goes to an organization that is looking at it from a public sector perspective, rather than going to a commercial entity, maybe Disney, having applied for .kids. Who knows? So I think that is how we need to look at it, because a quick look at the list, and there's nothing really prohibited by law for us in Kenya. What we want to look at is what it means for us from a public interest perspective.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
During the last year about First Freedom Day, I remember the PS Dr. He was very passionate and strong about being against
.XXX, yes.
Is it still the same?
Yeah, .XXX exists already. And I don't see any problem with that, because I don't think there's any, for us, I think having again spoken with him, and I think again we need to be corrected. That's why we need people like Grace Bomu, I'm looking at her, to who have legal expertise, to actually go through this list, compare it to our legal frameworks and the constitution, just to let us know again. And that's why I'm suggesting that we still have to go through a process, our own multi-stakeholder process, whereby we look at the list, we compare it to our legal provisions, and see whether there are any names. But also, I think, come up with our own. What do we mean by public interest? And so when we are making an early warning or objection as a country, what does that mean? And then in terms of why Kenya Airways and Safaricom and the others did not apply, I think it's not about the money. I think it's more about not being aware. Yeah, I don't want to call it ignorance, because I wouldn't imagine any of them. But I think it's that awareness. But also not just awareness. I think when you sit down, you think to yourself, we are not yet that so-called digital economy. I think, and I can see the reasoning. So why would I spend nearly $1 million to $2 million just to secure, Kenya Airways or Safaricom? And I think that's why it's important to send them to MultiChoice, so that MultiChoice can tell them why they spend that same amount of money to apply. And I think they'll see the result soon, perhaps in the next round.
I think I just want to add one or two things. And because I'm a player in the industry and I was involved from a commercial perspective, I honestly think that organizations like Kenya Airways, Safaricom, don't pay too much attention about this. They know, not that they're not aware, they're very aware. I will give a specific example. Kenya Airways, a few years ago, we asked them to protect all their domains. So we gave them a full list across, because here's the thing, we always think that we still wear that third world hat. And it's not an excuse anymore. We are operating in a global economy. The internet has no borders. If you put up your website today and you put a crappy website, everybody will see it. So you can't say, oh, I'm not Cisco, I'm not Microsoft. As long as you put something up there, if you are unable to maintain standards, then don't keep it there. So what really happened here in this particular case is Kenya Airways decided some domains they would register, some domains they wouldn't register. And guess what happened? Somebody in the UK registered. Why do you think Kenya Airways has Kenya-Airways.com?
Yes.
It's because somebody registered Kenya-Airways.com. And for a long time used it, and to use the language of my daughter, used it to diss KQ. And it went on for almost a year. We had to now get lawyers from the UK to sort it out. Now, something that would have cost them $10 ended up costing them $50,000 to resolve. Locally, we had a case I think last year, where somebody decided to register safaricon.co.ke instead of safaricon, and it went on and on. And you know, there were blogs where people said that Kenik and CCK muscled this guy. I shall not make any negative or positive comments on that, because at that point I was serving at the Kenik board, Alice. But the point here is that what I'm trying to say is some of these issues that we discuss here are not periphery anymore. I mean, raise your hand, anyone from a telco company here today. Raise your hand. My point exactly. Most of these guys are on the Kiptanet mailing list. Most of these guys are on other mailing lists, and the IGF has been talked about. So who are we to blame? Just to make one last comment for my young brother, or probably young enough to be my son. Yes, I'm on the right side of 40. Barak. Now, the point is, all this information is available. It's about interest and about deciding to take an active role as a private citizen or as an owner of a business. A few years ago, I had no clue. And in fact, up to today, I'm still struggling to understand some of these acronyms. Still, but it's a continuous learning process, but you've got to have the interest and you've got to say, I will participate here. So, boss, the internet is, well, unfortunately, it's not free, but you go, at least if you have an hour or two every day online and you have an interest to participate in these forums, get in. Alice, Barak, probably myself can assist in ensuring that you are facilitated. Who knows? You may find yourself 2-3 years from now appear talking about the same things that today you think is rocket science.
Oh yeah, and you had asked for about opportunities to participate. I think I keep sending messages on the Internet ISO Kenya and SCALPOP list. ICANN itself has a fellowship program and are able to sponsor people coming from developing countries to attend ICANN meetings. They're worth attending just to understand it. I've been working on this ICANN process, I think, since 2003, and it took me nearly 2 years just to even put up my hand and speak, because it can actually get complicated. And perhaps Gigi can add, because she's actually been a recipient of the scholarship programs, and they're quite good, and it's a good way of beginning to introduce yourself to the processes. And then on top of that, the different ICANN communities have their own funding. The CCNSO, GNSO have their own funding for the specific community members for that. So there's also quite a number of chances for people to participate. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
We'll take the online questions.
Yes, there is a question from Jolly McPhee from New York. He wants to know, why did nobody take advantage of the joint applicant support?
Thank you. I think I wanted to find out about awareness. As we talk about awareness, I think these platforms gives us the follow-up to be able to get aware about these things and to continuously be informed and educated on some of these things that are happening around. So wish to ask Alice about what are you doing, or what are we going to do as a Kenyan IGF to ensure continuity, that we can participate in the East African IGF Africa as well as the International IGF Conference.
All right, I'll start with the first question from Jolly McPhee in terms of the question about applicant support. I think I dealt with that at the beginning. And we seriously think it's because there was a lack of a good communication strategy, a lack of a good outreach and awareness creation strategy. And I know quite a number of communities spoke about this several times. There are GAC communiques questioning to what extent the outreach strategy was having any impact or not. And I think we can see the result. There were only 3, and again, those 3 came from the community. None of them, there's one from Africa, but they came from people who are already involved in the ICANN community, so people who understand ICANN processes. None of them came from African, Kenyan, or Kenyan businesses, for example, who would be interested, or the so-called grassroots. So I think, the answer to that question is because there simply was no awareness. So there was nobody, I don't think any one of you knew enough, if you could, to have gotten involved in it. And I can see people really agreeing with me that, even if you knew, even if, and I think I kept sending the message about applicant support, but I think the way it was presented, it was always presented, I think the first time it was presented was at the Global IGF, and that's not the place. I simply tend to think ICANN will probably, or we will probably need to go and sit with the ISPs, sit with you again and again and again to introduce it, to help take you through the process so that you're able to see the business sense, or even the business case for it, for applying for a gTLD and running that as a business. So I think there's also a lack of understanding of the business aspect of domain names, and I think that is very important. I think it should be ICANN's role going forward, and I hope it gets into their strategic plan, and that's why it's very important that we all respond to their call to input into the strategic plan. For the second question, if you could repeat it.
Well, I'm saying that, as a matter of continuity, we had a good number of Kenyans participating at the Nairobi IGF. And I think it would be important for us to continue having our voice and exposure by enabling as a good number of Kenyan people participate at Africa and International IGF.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good contribution. And I think one of the things we'd like to promise for now is and I think I'm looking at Grace Bomu here and Barack, who are going to take over the mantle from here on with the Kenya IGF, is if we can ensure that every Kenya IGF, there's a session on ICANN. So we could continue creating that awareness at every IGF. We are also going to have a session on ICANN during the East Africa IGF and look at an East African, a sub-regional perspective from it and a sub-regional contribution towards ICANN processes. So we'll continue working on this, but we are also going to encourage ICANN to set up a presence in Africa, to actually do a little bit more if they're to claim to be an organization that cares about diversity and competition. Thank you. I'd like to hand over back to Grace. Thank you everyone for the very animated discussions and questions.